Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! First story. Neighbor sued me after harassing my dog for months. Lost horribly. Many commenters telling me that you guys would enjoy the story. About 6 or 7 months ago, my neighbor got a drone. I don't mind people having hobbies, but for some reason he insisted on flying like the biggest jerk possible. He would hover in front of other houses and windows, try to race cars going down the road. Worst of all, he had a habit of flying his drone in my fenced backyard, buzzing over my dog, diving low just over my dog's head before circling around to do it again. My dog isn't small. He's about 32 kilograms and a Malamute, but the drone terrified him, and I was worried what would happen if it hit him. I asked my neighbor many times to please not fly in my yard, and explained that it was scaring my dog. He basically told me to get lost and laughed in my face. When it still continued, I called the police. Unfortunately, there wasn't much they could do other than ask him to please not fly over my house or property. And finally, in late December, it happened. My dog got tired of his nonsense and managed to catch the drone right as it was diving towards him. And he shredded the drone. And the thing basically became a jumbled mess of wires and plastic. The neighbor was pissed. He stormed over to my house swearing and threatening me, which I ignored. A week later, I got summoned to small claims court. He wanted $900 for the cost of his drone, an additional $300 for supposedly denying him access to his property. The drone sat in my yard for a couple of hours before it was retrieved. Screw that. He could have killed my dog. I don't have kids or a girlfriend, I just have my dog who has been my best friend for the past 7 years. That dog has moved with me 3 times, was there when I graduated college, saw me buy my first house and my first new car. I love my dog, his family. I went to legal advice, got some great help from them, and turns out, him suing me was the best thing to ever happen. When we got to small claims court, the judge basically laughed away his claims that I had intentionally trained my dog to attack his drone. But little did he know I was prepared. I had dozens of photos of my yard showing it was impossible for him to accidentally fly that low to my dog. Videos of him harassing my dog in the past, and I had saved all my medical bills from taking my dog to the vet. A $700 for an x-ray. Check. Another $250 to sedate him during this process. Why not? I don't want him to be uncomfortable. Full dental exam was tooth cleaning and repair, $400. Then there was a cost of anti-anxiety meds and a secondary checkup. Wet food for a week in case his teeth were hurt, an extra just for good measure. In the end, he ended up owing me almost $2,000, and now is being investigated by the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. He was investigated for not having a registered drone and violating many of the regulations concerning drone flight. Too near an airport, too close to other people, out of sight of operator, way above the maximum altitude. Enjoy never being allowed to fly drones again. Next story. Landlord is jealous of my income, so he raises my rent $500. I screw him years later for $20,000. In the late 90s, my wife and I were just married, just getting started. We decided to dink it for a few years, double income, no kids, to save up for a down payment on a house. The dot-com bubble was still rising and I was a newly minted software developer, I had an entry-level job for a while and then got recruited to a new city and a new job that paid 3 times what I was making before. It was an offer too good to pass up. I ran the numbers and it was a no-brainer. By living frugally and saving my entire salary, living off just her income, we would easily have enough in a year to put 20% down payment on a new house. We rented an apartment in a new city that was listed for $950 a month. The landlord was a real estate agent who owned a 2-bedroom condo as an investment property. Let's call him Hank. Hank was a thin, gray, no-nonsense guy. He was pleasant enough, but perfunctory, dry, and had no sense of humor. He made a point of explaining that under no circumstances was he responsible for maintaining the garbage disposal and that it was not included in the rental agreement, and he would not be responsible for fixing it were it to break. Okay? He seemed slightly amused by us. A clueless young couple, but I could tell he wanted to rent to us because we were very obviously a safe choice as renters. We filled out the rental agreement and the credit check. This is where my troubles began. Hank looked hard at the credit application where I listed my job title, software developer, and my income $75,000 a year. For a 23-year-old in his second year out of college, in the late 1990s, this is a small fortune. Throw in my wife's salary and we were over 6 figures in income, renting an apartment far beneath our means. Like I said, think is the way to go when starting out. At least for us. I can't believe how much money you make. Hank must have said it half a dozen times, muttering under his breath. I explained we were saving to buy a house and that we were only going to stay in the apartment for a year. We might stay a few months after the term is over. Would month to month be okay after a year? Hank assured us that it would be fine. We saw Hank only once during the year and he again mentioned my salary and how he couldn't believe that's what software developers were making. It was awkward and I gave a vague reply. Anyway, a year later we had found a house to buy, signed all the papers, and were making plans to move. The new house wasn't going to be ready until 2 months after our rental lease was up. So I called Hank to ask if we could, as discussed, simply extend the lease by 2 months before moving out. Hank assured me on the phone it would be no problem and he would send over an extension for us to sign. The extension arrived in the mail and it included a month-to-month clause and a $500 increase in the rent. I flipped out and called him. Hank, why are you increasing the rent over 50%? That's just too much. That's more than my new mortgage is going to be. He was super condescending to me. Rocky Moose. It's what the apartment goes for now. I will be losing money by renting it for less. I tried to reason with him, but it was very clear he knew I could afford the $500. Had no choice in the matter, and he was going to screw us over as best as he could. He got angry with me for arguing my point, and I will never forget his parting words. You don't have to like it, Rocky Moose. You just have to pay for it. My wife and I tried to figure out a way to move out early by putting our furniture in storage for a couple months, and maybe crashing with friends. But it just wasn't going to work. I swallowed my pride and wrote out the check for $1,450 for the extra months. A month later, I wrote a similar check, and then we moved out. I made sure the apartment was spotless before moving, but still Hank withheld $300 from our security deposit for nonsense stuff that were just a way for him to squeeze a few more dollars from the kids who made too much money. $100 for cleaning, sure, but $300 was obscene. In my mind, he had screwed me over for $1,200 and there was nothing I could do about it. What made it even upsetting is that I saw the ad Hank put in the paper after we moved out that he listed the apartment for rent at only $150 more than we have been paying originally. Not the grossly inflated $500 increase. And it didn't trend. A month later, I saw the same ad and he had lowered the price to $75 more than we have been paying. And I assume it got trended since the ad stopped appearing. Fast forward about 5 years. Life is good, the house is good, and we have a baby. And even though the dot-com bubble has burst, I'm still employed. One day, out of the blue, I overhear one of my co-workers, Phil, a senior developer, talking to the guy working the reception desk. "Hey Mike, I'm expecting someone to drop off some paperwork for me. If a Hank Wazowski asks for me, tell him I'll be right out." I freeze and get a taste of bile in my mouth, remembering how I had to write out that name on those checks all those years ago. There is no way it's the same guy, right? I walk over to Phil, who's still by the reception desk. "Phil," I say, "how do you know that name?" "Hank Wazowski." Phil explained that Hank is his real estate agent. I bought my condo through him many years ago. I'm selling my condo now so I can buy a house. So I'm going to ask him to be my agent again. Do you know him? I told Phil that I used to rent an apartment from Hank and I described what he looks like. Phil confirmed the description. It's the same guy. Wow, small world, right? And on cue, right then the front door to the office opens and in walks Hank Wazowski. I stare in disbelief. He's carrying a folder of papers and doesn't recognize me. Phil and Hank shake hands and they talk for a few minutes. And I stand there silently, wondering what to do. Phil finally says, "Hank, this is my friend Rocky Moose. I think you may have already met." "Yes, hello Hank. Good to see you again. My wife and I were your tenants a few years ago on X Street. Remember the software developer who rented for a year saving to buy a house? Well, this is where I work. Here, with Phil." Hank's eyes indicate that he now remembers me, and he's starting to put it all together. We shake hands and he says yes. Of course he remembers. And he asks how are we doing? "Oh, we're just fine, thanks for asking." Phil says that you're his real estate agent. Small world, isn't it? Hanks nods pleasantly. He still doesn't remember the details of our last conversation. I do some quick math in my head. This is the early/mid 2000s. The real estate market is very strong and easy money for any agent. The crash of 2008 is still a few years in the future. So I start to think out loud. Selling the condo for around $150 to $2,000 and you're looking at houses in the $500 southern range. So that's $650 to $700,000 in total transaction. An agent getting 3% on the sale and the purchase is getting around $20,000 for his trouble, right? That's a good commission for the agent, isn't it? Hank's eyes flash, and I can tell he remembers everything about me now. Phil is surprised at my passive-aggressive tone, and I'm enjoying the uncomfortable silence. Hank deflects my question, saying it's complicated, and tells Phil to send back the papers as soon as possible. He shakes hands with Phil, looks at me, nods and goes to leave. "It was really good to see you again, Hank." I call behind him. He exits the building. As the door is still shutting, I say a bit too loudly, so that Hank can hear, "Phil, don't sign anything just yet. I have a story to tell you." Phil looks at me and says, "Rocky, what the hell was that all about?" And he looks pissed and confused at my behavior. I tell Phil the whole story. The rent, the $500 increase, the security deposit, that you don't have to like it, you just have to pay it. Everything. Phil, you can't use this guy to sell your condo. You can't use him to buy a house. I hate him. He's evil. I will help you find another real estate agent. Just use anyone but Hank. So the great thing about Phil is that, well, he's a great guy. He says he's a little surprised at my story, and has always known Hank as a straightforward guy. But I totally see him doing that to you. He admits, "There is no way I could use him now." Then Phil's eyes lit up a bit. "What do you want me to say when I fire him?" I have special feelings for Phil now. We came up with a plan and I made sure there were some key phrases in Phil's words to Hank. We planned it all out together in advance. My only regret is that I didn't get to see Hank's reaction in person a day later when Phil made the following phone call while I stood behind him listening. "Hi Hank, it's Phil calling. Yeah, about that. I've decided to get some other quotes from other agents. I'm not going to sign up with you." There is a pause. No, you shouldn't give a discount. You'd be losing money if you did that. Another pause. No, this is just a decision I've made. No, it has nothing to do with Rocky Moose. And now a third pause. Well, you don't have to like it, Hank. You just have to accept it. Goodbye. Click. And it was the greatest revenge I could ever imagine. Through a chance meeting years later, Hank got screwed out of $20,000 in easy commissions. The best part is, Hank absolutely knew it had everything to do with Rocky Moose. Next story. That one time I stole a couch and traded it for a PlayStation 2. Backstory. This happened 13 years ago when I was living in California. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment with my boyfriend. He asked me to move out 6 months later, but we were still dating. This should have clued me in right there. I moved in with a work friend who needed a roommate. He said he was going out of town and asked me to go by the apartment and check on his cat. I agreed, and the second time I went by, I heard noises in the bedroom. I was concerned about a burglary and went to check it out. It was my boyfriend having an affair. I officially ended a relationship that was already dead. We had moved into that apartment together and bought furniture off Craigslist. I had purchased a couch and coffee table. I owned a truck at the time, so I gathered a few of my friends and went to the apartment. I entered using my key, he never asked for it back, and took the couch and table. I did not disturb anything else. Well, where are you going to sit now? I heard from a mutual friend that he called the cops on me, saying that I robbed him. They couldn't charge me with anything because I entered using my own key. My name was on the lease, and I did not damage anything of his. A cherry on top, I didn't even need the couch, as my new roommate already had furniture. The guy in the apartment next door to her needed a couch, but didn't have any money. He did have a PlayStation 2 though. And a bunch of games. So we made a deal. I still have that PlayStation. Next story. Policyholder's logic got her more than she bargained for with her policy referral. This could be an entitled person's story, but since I complied with a client's logic, I felt like it belonged here. I used to work as a personal auto insurance liability adjuster, and my job was to investigate accidents and coverages, determine who is at fault and what coverage they have. An issue we commonly run into is undisclosed drivers. Many parents do not add their kids to their policy to avoid a rate increase, only to be stunned when we deny their collision, since they essentially lied about the drivers in their household, and depending on the underwriter, they can be dropped. I had a claim where a woman's son who was not listed on the policy and was over 18 hit another car. In the state she lived in, she was required to have him on her policy, New Jersey, since that was his permanent resident. She had had him but removed him. She was one of those Karen types who felt she knew more than me. I asked her why, and she said, "He's away at college." All year? No, most of it, and his college is out of state. Does he live in the dorm or off campus? The dorms. Where does his driver's license say he lives? My address. Okay, he still needs to be on your policy. She condescendingly says, no, he doesn't. He lives in the dorms for most of the year. So he's not at this address for most of the year. Yes, but when he comes home for his breaks like summer or winter break, doesn't he use this car at your home? No, he has it with him on campus. Oh, so your son lives in the dorms, but this car that he was driving he keeps with him on campus? Yes, he needs it for his job and to get around. And is this car registered to him at the address of this campus? No, the car is registered and insured by me in this state. Oh, so even though he's not on the policy, he is still the primary driver and is keeping this car for most of the year at his college out of state. Yes. Thank you, that is all. As soon as I hung up, I did an underwriting referral for the car being garaged out of the state, since based on her logic, son was not a resident of her household, so that meant the car was not being kept at her primary address. She was sent a letter by underwriting explaining that her policy was not going to be renewed, and since we reported the accident to the insurance database, all new carriers would know her son needed to be on her policy. She called her agent and we did a conference call, and she was livid. I explained that I had taken her side. She said he was not a resident of her address, since most of the year her son was on campus, but that because of that the car was not being garaged at her address, since the car was also out of state for most of the year. She hung up in a huff after the agent tried to diplomatically explain the situation. As soon as she left the call, he thanked me and told me she was his least favorite customer, and he was now thrilled he wouldn't have to deal with her anymore. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.